What's up, guys, and welcome to the Sports 2.0 show. I'm going to be one of your co-hosts for our show today. I'm Will Reed, joined by Alec Busse and Akshay Kumbar. We've had some pretty good traffic on the Sports 2.0 show so far today. I did the show earlier this morning with some of my co-hosts, Parlay Power Hour with Grant Mitchell and Tanner Kern, and then we recapped some of the best Patriots Super Bowls. That was a great debate that I had with a special guest and one of our other content creators, Ryan Goetze of the Sports 2.0 network. But this is the first time I'm seeing Alec and Akshay this week. How you guys been?
Been doing good. Thanks for asking. I'm excited to feels like August 1st is when that football kind of itch starts to really hit me. Obviously, I cover Illinois football. Training camp started today, so been over there a couple times. And obviously, we're talking about fantasy football and the NFL. So football is here. It feels like we got the Hall of Fame game or whatever tomorrow or Wednesday. So football is here, and the itch is full in effect for me.
Yeah, how about you, Akshay?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Finally getting over that hump, like Alex said, hitting August 1st. So got a lot of football coming up the next couple of months. I'm really excited to just watch, even college football as well.
Yeah, they mentioned it. We're going to be talking some fantasy football for you guys. It's always a favorite of mine. I'm always in multiple leagues every year. So we'll jump right into it. We're going to give you guys some of our top consensus picks at each position, and then we'll run through a bit of sleepers and some busts here. But going into the top quarterbacks, obviously Patrick Mahomes, guys like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are the top guys on everyone's list. But Akshay, who really stands out here in the top tier for the quarterback for you?
I think Patrick Mahomes really stands out. He's been very consistent ever since winning that MVP season. Came third in MVP voting last season. He's got, huge offensive threats, and they bolstered up that O-line as well to protect him after watching that Super Bowl. So I think he's going to have another great year. I think he's definitely going to rack up the fantasy numbers. He has Chiefs have a fairly easy schedule this year again, so it should be fun to watch.
What about you, Alec? Who are you looking at in quarterbacks?
Yeah, so I won't take as easy of a route out and take Patrick Mahomes. I feel like that's an easy one. I'll give you credit, though, actually, for picking an easy one. I'm actually going to go with Dak Prescott, which I feel like might be a little bit of a gamble just on the standpoint that he's coming off of an ankle injury, but I kind of expect him to be healthy this coming year, and I also think that he's probably going to be coming off of this ankle injury with a lot to prove, especially after signing that big contract. And he's also got a lot of weapons around him. He's obviously highlighted by CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. And Dak was really good last year in his first couple weeks before he suffered that ankle injury. He was one of the top fantasy quarterbacks. He had more yards, I think, than anyone else in the NFL at that point. So I'm gonna take Dak, and I feel like he's probably not in that tier one of quarterbacks that you kind of talk about with Mahomes, Allen, Murray, and Jackson.
Yeah. Obviously there's worry coming there. I'm a Washington football team fan, so having Dak Prescott on my team is basically a no-no. I can't be rooting for him at any time during the season. But he definitely puts up the yards, and with that defense still not being strong, I think they're going to see the ball a lot. He's got great weapons with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. You mentioned it also, CeeDee Lamb. And then Akshay with Patrick Mahomes. That's basically as surefire as it gets for a number one fantasy quarterback with Tyreek Hill as his best weapon. Travis Kelce's in there. He's still got guys like Mecole Hardman that can come through. Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of the backfield. My personal favorite is one of the ones that Alec mentioned. I'm a big Kyler Murray fan. They've got great weapons there in Arizona too. They have Chase Edmonds out of the backfield, obviously in wide receiver core. They got DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best wide receivers, fantasy or not. Larry Fitzgerald is coming back. Andy Isabella, Christian Kirk. They've got a great wide receiver core there. So, and Kyler Murray can do it all. He can do it on the ground. He can do it through the air. He has a lot of opportunity for points in fantasy football, which is why I think he's going to have some relatively good success this year. What do you guys think about Kyler Murray?
Yeah, I'm a big Kyler Murray guy. I was big on him coming out of college and coming out of Oklahoma, which is obviously easy to say. He was the number one pick, and he's a guy who's pretty electric with his legs and his arm. But you look at the talent that's around him now, DeAndre Hopkins for a second year, that relationship, that rapport between those two is only going to get better, and it's only going to increase. I also think that the Cardinals are maybe going to open up their offense a little bit more, run more, QB options, more opportunities for Kyler to kind of get out in space and run a little bit more now that they had a more traditional offseason where he's going to have an opportunity to really do more reads and kind of use his athleticism to his strength a little bit more. I like your take there with Kyler Murray.
Yeah,
Yeah,
how
I
about
have
you,
to agree.
Akshay?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Kyler Murray is a huge underdog for fantasy this year. Even the rookie Rondell Moore out of Purdue, he's an electric player. Really can get yards after the catch. So I think he's going to have a huge role with the Cardinals this year. And I think Kyler Murray, he had his first couple of weeks last season, he had an MVP caliber season to start. Kind of died down a little bit towards the end, but I think if he can, keep that play up and keep it consistent throughout the season, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback fantasy wise, and I think that's going to be a really safe pick for a lot of people.
Yeah, similar to Alec, I think they could go to a lot of that read option stuff that Kyler Murray is familiar with. Obviously, with his stature, injuries can be a concern with a guy like him going out and running the ball a lot. We saw it happen to RG3. RG3 was taller, but he had that same kind of lengthy stature. So that's always something to watch out for. But Kyler Murray has done a pretty good job of staying off the injury list so far in his career. We'll move into top running backs. There's always those top tier running backs. Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry were top of the league last year, depending on what kind of scoring you went in for fantasy football. But Akshay, who do you have as your top running back heading into this 2021 season?
I'm going to go with the second-year man out of Wisconsin. I'm going to go Jonathan Taylor from the Indianapolis Colts. He was a great asset for the Colts last season. Finished second in rushing yards behind Derrick Henry as a rookie. He's got incredible speed, incredible power, especially behind that Colts O-line. It was really run dominant. I think he's going to have another great year. Especially with Carson Wentz being injured and missing the first 5 weeks of the season, they're going to rely on the run game a lot. So I think he's going to get a lot more touches, and he's going to have a great season.
Yeah, there's a couple guys for me too. Obviously, agree with Jonathan Taylor, especially with the Carson Wentz news that comes out today. I think it was Schefter reported that he's expected to miss like 5 to 12 weeks or something crazy like that. Outside of the McCaffrey, Cooks, and Henrys, I think there's a couple guys that you should really want to keep an eye on. Taylor's obviously one of them. Aaron Jones in Green Bay is someone who I feel like is just always really undervalued in fantasy, and that offense is going to be really prolific again, obviously headlined by Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. But another one that I find really interesting, and this one's probably in like that tier 3 of running backs, is Antonio Gibson. He's the guy last year who really broke out as a rookie for Washington, and Will, you know a lot about the success he had last year being a fan of Washington. And then here's another one that's more of that like recognizable name, Alvin Kamara. Obviously with Drew Brees not coming back to the Saints this year and opting for retirement, I'm interested to see how much the Saints actually decide to run the ball this year. We still don't really know who's going to play quarterback for them, whether it's going to be Taysom Hill or famous Jameis Winston. So whoever it is that's playing quarterback, how much are they going to run it? Are they still going to have that kind of good relationship with Kamara as a dump down option that Drew Brees really found successful? So those are things that are going to be really interesting to me following Kamara.
Yeah, I really like Jonathan Taylor from you, Akshay. I mean, obviously with that Carson Wentz news, him going down, being out for a prolonged period of time, it's always smart to, in fantasy football especially, look at things like usage. Jonathan Taylor's going to get a lot of that, especially with Carson Wentz out. And they also just don't have that many weapons. They've got T.Y. Hilton still sticking around. They've got Michael Pittman Jr. out of the draft last year. So they've got some quality wide receiver weapons, but I'm not sure if I have faith in whoever their quarterback's going to be. I know Jacob Eason was taking starter reps for them. He hasn't gotten any starting time yet in his NFL career after a solid college career, but I'm not too sure if I can be confident in him. So they're definitely going to be relying on him a lot, especially behind guys like Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly on that Colts offensive line that's really strong. But for me, I'm a big Nick Chubb fan out of Cleveland for the Browns. He's out of all the running backs, I think he's probably the best bruiser back besides Derrick Henry, obviously. But if you look at the numbers, Nick Chubb did come out with more broken tackles than Derrick Henry last year, if you believe it or not. But Nick Chubb is a guy that can kind of do it all. Obviously, they still have Kareem Hunt in the backfield as well there with Cleveland. So you got to factor that in, that Kareem Hunt could be taking away either goal line touches or throws out of the backfield. But Nick Chubb can do the same kind of workload there. He's a 3-down back. Cleveland relied on him a lot last year. He suffered a few injuries, which kept him out of that top 3, that top tier of fantasy running backs last year. But if he can shake those injury concerns, I think he can be a top running back in fantasy this year. What do you guys think?
Actually, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. I have to agree. I think Nick Chubb, obviously, he's an incredible running back, has a lot of power, especially behind that Browns O-line. I think they give him the run lanes very well. And that Cleveland offense is based around the run game. Baker Mayfield is a play-action quarterback, so they really establish the run early and often in games. I also think that his partner Kareem Hunt will also have a pretty good year as well. He had a decent year last year as well as running back too. But those two guys are definitely the main workhorse for the Cleveland Browns. I think Nick Chubb is going to have a great year again. In my opinion, I think he might actually break top three running backs fantasy wise this year.
Yeah, I'll stick with the running back conversation, but I'm going to change names just a little bit. I agree that Chubb's going to have a good year, especially after he signs that contract. Was that yesterday that he signed a contract or this morning? I don't remember when exactly it was. I think Saquon Barkley is kind of an interesting one to follow as well, also coming off an ACL injury. But I'm also still really high on Ezekiel Elliott. I think Zeke, you kind of mentioned the bruiser back kind of thing with Chubb. Zeke's still up there. He's definitely not going to get up to the yards and probably the touchdowns that we saw earlier in his years, especially now with the wide receiver talent that Dallas has for Dak Prescott to throw it to. But I still think Zeke's a pretty good safe bet. I mean, he's probably, in my opinion, a top 7, top 8 running back that I would consider taking in any draft at this point. So I think Zeke is one you should want to keep an eye on too if you want to have kind of just a safety blanket for a running back, a guy that you don't expect to get hurt, a guy that you can probably count on to get you at least 7-8 touchdowns during the season.
Yeah, and Zeke was a big product, I think, of that Cowboys offensive line that started to kind of get back to where they were in Zeke's earlier campaigns. They got Lyle Collins. They still have Tyron Smith. The right guard, Zach Martin, is out now. But they're starting to build up the offensive line back. And that's a big reason why Zeke was able to have a lot of success there in Dallas. We got a comment here from our very own Grant Mitchell. Cleveland's O-line is filthy. Chubb and Hunt both will produce. I agree. Chubb is one of my favorite running backs in the league. Hunt can do it all. Also, he took a lot of the goal line touches last year, which upset me as a Nick Chubb owner in fantasy for a lot of my teams last year. Kareem Hunt was taking a lot of those goal line touches and getting all those touchdowns. So those are two definitely to watch out for when it comes to running backs. Moving into the wide receiver conversation, this one I feel there's always a breakout wide receiver every year. Last year, rookie Justin Jefferson was big time on the fantasy scene for the Minnesota Vikings. So what do you guys think for the top wide receivers heading into the 2021 season?
Yeah, obviously, you've got your Tyreek Hills, you've got your Devontae Adams. I think both of those two guys are probably number 1 and 2 on most people's boards. And I would suggest siding with Adams just because of the double points that you're getting. I guess you're getting it too with Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes. I just feel like Adams is more consistent than Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is going to give you that 1 or 2 games where he's just going to go off for 40-something points. But Devontae Adams seems pretty consistent, especially in a PPR league, that he's going to get you over 20 points on a weekly basis. And that's a pretty good mark to just kind of know you're getting from a wide receiver. But outside of those top 3, a guy like A.J. Brown's going to be really interesting out in Tennessee because now you've got to balance Julio Jones in Tennessee too. So does his value kind of fall a little bit, or does Julio's value kind of go up a little bit maybe out there in Tennessee? And then there's a couple of guys too. I think Allen Robinson's a really interesting one. Is he a top 10 fantasy wide receiver? He's so hard to evaluate just because the Bears quarterback situation has been so bad the last couple of years. And I think a guy like CeeDee Lamb might even be undervalued. And I know I keep saying CeeDee Lamb in the show, but he's, in my opinion, a top 13, top 15 kind of wide receiver on most fantasy boards, in my opinion.
How about you, Akshay?
I agree with everything Alex said. I'm going to add a couple of interesting picks. Top wide receiver. I think someone who's going to who was a little bit underrated last year, who's going to have a great year this year, is Robert Woods from the Los Angeles Rams. Now that he actually has a quarterback who can throw the ball to him, I mean, it's his numbers are going to go up. Cooper Kupp's numbers are going to go up. I think those two guys are going to have big breakout years this year. Also, Calvin Ridley last year had a great season. And now that he's wide receiver 1 in Atlanta, I think that he's going to get a lot more touches and a lot more looks. Definitely see his usage go up. And I know that he's not really a wide receiver, but I mean the way that the Raiders play him, Darren Waller, I mean they play him outside the numbers like a majority of the time. So I mean he's he can produce and he creates matchup nightmares. So I think that he's going to have a great year as well.
Yeah, I mean, you essentially took the notes that I had written down and just said them for everybody else before I could get to them. But I'm a huge Calvin Ridley fan. That he's poised for a ginormous year with the Atlanta Falcons this year. They've always been known as a high-powered passing offense with Julio Jones there. They used to have Roddy White, and both those guys will always be great fantasy producers. And now it's basically Calvin Ridley by himself with Matt Ryan there, and no real top running back to kind of back them up. So Calvin Ridley is going to be seeing a lot of targets this year. That also means he can get a lot of attention from the defense. But when you get a lot of targets on offense, that comes out to more fantasy opportunities, more fantasy points. So I'm a big fan of that. I was actually going to mention those Rams wide receivers in my sleepers picks when we got down to them. But I do think they're going to have a great year. Jared Goff is way below the talent level of Matthew Stafford. So introducing Matthew Stafford to that Rams offense, to the mind of Sean McVay, I think they can do a lot of great things there. But just to throw out a few more names, Keenan Allen, I think, could have a pretty good year this year. He's a top wide receiver. He's probably the best route runner in the NFL. Having young quarterback Justin Herbert is a real benefit to him. And his fantasy numbers are bound to have a nice increase this year. And then, I mean, he'll have some competition on his own team from Mike Williams, but that doesn't really worry me too much. Keenan Allen's a big target. He seems to get a lot of targets from Justin Herbert, and they seem to build a rapport as the season was increasing last year. So tight ends we'll head into. Usually, I mean, this is a top three list basically at the top, and then you can just break it down however you want to with the rest of the tight ends. You got Waller, however you want to order it. Waller, Kelsey, and George Kittle should be in your top three, no matter how you put it. But I want to know who do you guys have as your number one out of those top three guys?
I have Kelsey just because to me he's the most wide receiver-like, and he has the best quarterback and an offense that just has him set up to be the most successful on the most consistent basis. When I'm drafting a tight end, the biggest thing I'm looking for is consistency. I mean, last year I got stuck with Gronk, and that's just like consistently felt like 2 to 3 points a week, and that's just really frustrating at the tight end position. So if you're able to get a Kelsey, Kittle, or Waller, three guys who basically play wide receiver in that offense in their respective offenses to a point, I think you have to take one of those three just because they're consistent large point numbers.
Yeah, Akshay, what do you think? Who's your number one out of those guys?
I'm going to go Darren Waller. I know that, Travis Kelce obviously puts up big numbers with Patrick Mahomes, and George Kittle is an incredible tight end. But I think Darren Waller, the way that the Raiders use him and his frame and the mismatches that he creates, I think that, and his athleticism as well, I think it gives him a slight advantage over Kittle and Kelce. And just talking about fantasy-wise, I think he gets a lot more touches, gets a lot more looks compared to those other guys. Mostly because the Raiders don't have that many threats at the receiver position. They have Henry Ruggs, and that's probably about it. So I like Darren Waller as probably the top tight end in this fantasy year.
Yeah, you mentioned the main thing I look at when I look at Darren Waller is the weapons that they have besides him, just to catch the ball and be on the receiving end. They have Henry Ruggs they drafted last year, Hunter Renfrow, Zay Jones, but they don't have really the top tier talent that you're looking for, especially on the fantasy end. Darren Waller is going to be getting a lot of receptions. He was a big PPR addition for a lot of people last year. He got a lot of catches, up over 10 a lot of times last year. Same thing with Kelsey. I think if I was to look at these top three, I got to go with Kelsey just because he plays with Patrick Mahomes, and he's going to be given those opportunities in that Kansas City Chiefs offense. Now that Sammy Watkins is gone, that takes away another weapon that was taking away opportunities from Travis Kelce. I think Travis Kelce will take up more of a workload than he had last year, even though last year's workload was insane on their way last season. So I got to go with Kelce out of those top guys. But if we're diving deeper out of that top tier, which I wouldn't like to do, but, sometimes it happens and you miss out on drafting one of those top tight ends, I think rookie Kyle Pitts is going to be huge for the Atlanta offense. I mean, we mentioned it earlier. It's basically Calvin Ridley and nobody else as a wide receiver there in Atlanta. And they brought Kyle Pitts in as their top draft pick at the number 4 overall pick. to be basically a wide receiver tight end hybrid. That's what he was at Florida, and I think he's going to do it again in the NFL. And they've got some big things planned for him in Atlanta, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we're going to talk about, guys that you should look for at the tight end outside of those top three, there's a clear answer to me, and it's Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts being a top 4 pick at tight end, that's something that's basically unheard of. And he's not really a tight end. I mean, we think back to like when Jimmy Graham was with the Saints a long time ago and he was trying to get paid as a wide receiver. Like, that's what Kyle Pitts basically is. And he's got a quarterback and an offense that's going to throw it all over the field with Matt Ryan. Kyle Pitts is someone who I feel very comfortable drafting, right after those top 3. And I would probably take him around the same time I would take a Mark Andrews from Baltimore, maybe around the same time as I would take a TJ Hawkinson out in Detroit. And honestly, I might take him before I would take Hawkinson just because they're the Lions and it's hard to trust that offense. And I think they're going to run it a lot with DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I put him right up there with Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews had a really nice season last year with Lamar Jackson. He gets a lot of touchdown and red zone opportunities. So that's why Mark Andrews is really a big-time tight end threat for the Ravens and in fantasy football because he gets the touchdowns. But Kyle Pitts, I think, has an opportunity to do it all. His perfect pro comparison heading into the season has to be Darren Waller. I mean, Akshay mentioned it. Darren Waller lines up on the outside half the time for the Oakland Raiders, and you saw that they were throwing fades and stuff to Kyle Pitts in college. So he's not a generic tight end by any means. And I think he has a great opportunity with the Falcons this year. Akshay, I know you haven't had any inputs on to Kyle Pitts yet, so what do you think about him?
No, I think he's an absolute beast. He's, he rightfully so deserves to be the highest drafted tight end of all time. He's going to be an absolute stud for the Falcons, especially with Matt Ryan. Such a great quarterback and finding his threats down the field. So he's going to have a great career. I think he's definitely. I think actually he'll pass Darren Waller for sure. On probably this season, in my opinion. But I think him and Darren Waller are two hybrid tight ends that are really going to change the game for a lot of offenses. And we're going to see it, in the next couple of years as well.
Yeah. All right, so we'll head in. This is my favorite part of the show, the sleepers and bust part. So any position, whatever you want to shout out. Akshay, who is your biggest sleeper in the late rounds of your fantasy drafts this year?
I'm going to go with wide receiver Brandon Ayuk from the San Francisco 49ers. We've seen it in training camp. He's been the clear-cut wide receiver 1. He's been absolutely electric when he catches the ball. He has great change of direction, very hard to take down in the open field. And if Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance, whoever is starting, get him the ball, he'll make plays for the 49ers. And they can really use him in the run game as well, running jet sweeps and stuff like that. So I think he's going to have a really big year for the 49ers, and I think that he's going to, definitely be a workhorse for a lot of fantasy teams.
All right, Alec, who do you got? Who's your biggest sleeper?
Yeah, I'll give you one. James Robinson with Jacksonville. I think that's just kind of an interesting situation with the running back situation there. With Trevor Lawrence obviously playing quarterback, how much are they going to throw the ball? How much are they going to try and put him in a situation where he can get hit when they don't have an experienced offensive line? They don't have any great wide receiver targets outside of DJ Chark. He's really their most proven pass catcher. So I think James Robinson is one to really kind of keep an eye on, but another one to keep an eye on down in Jacksonville. And this is probably going to make it sound like I'm high on Jacksonville, and I'm definitely not. I think that they're going to be picking in the top 10 again next year. But I think Travis Etienne could kind of have a pretty big year. Obviously, he's got a pretty good rapport with Trevor Lawrence. I think that they're going to use Etienne a lot as like a dump down back, screens. I think if you're in a PPR and you're looking for a guy to play your flex, or someone that might be on the waiver wire at some point later in the year, I would be willing to pick up a Travis Etienne because I think he's going to get a few receptions a game, and we know how great he is in space. I'm kind of liking Travis Etienne this year with Jacksonville.
Yeah, I'm gonna go deep in the running backs, and I'm gonna say, I mentioned him earlier when we were talking about Kyler Murray. I really like Chase Edmonds in Arizona. They brought in James Conner to be one of their other top backs in Arizona, but Chase Edmonds has headed into this training camp as the presumed starter for the Arizona Cardinals, and he can kind of do a lot of the things that Alvin Kamara does for the Saints. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can get up there with near 80 receptions like Kamara does if they use him in that type of capacity. And he's put on a few pounds during this offseason, and he can become kind of like a bruiser back near the goal line. not too physical, but he can push his way through and get some touchdowns there. So I don't think a lot of people are going to be looking at him, but I think he has a good amount of potential to break out. He showed it a few years ago when David Johnson went down with an injury. Chase Edmonds filled in and had a few games where he was over 20 points. I think he had another one where he was over 30. So he's shown he has the ability to score fantasy points in the NFL. So I think he has a good opportunity. Do you guys have any other potential sleepers that you guys are looking at?
I got Terry McLaurin from the Washington football team. I know that they don't have the best of quarterback situations there in Washington, but he's still a very speedy receiver, can get open just by running past almost anybody in the league. So I think they're going to find ways to get him the ball. I think he's going to have a really big year as well. Not to the extent where he's going to be like a tier 1 receiver, but he'll definitely put up a lot of points for you fantasy wise.
Yeah, I'll give you another one, Will. You mentioned Justin Jefferson last year with Miami and how he had a really good – or not with Miami, excuse me, with Minnesota, how he had a really good year up there with Kirk Cousins. I'll give you another rookie wide receiver again this year, Jalen Waddle. He's probably a late, like 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11th round draft pick in your fantasy drafts this year if you're in a 10 or 12-man league. Again, he's got a good relationship with Tua. Obviously, I think there's a lot of questions out on Tua and what kind of quarterback he's going to be in the NFL, especially after some of the struggles he had last year. But I do think Waddle's a good deep play threat, and those are always an attractive option to have on your fantasy team at wide receiver.
Yeah, I do like him. I'm not a huge fan of going with rookies in fantasy football drafts, but they do present a lot of value. There's going to be at least one rookie that breaks out. It's just a matter of finding out which one it's going to be. And then Terry McLaurin out of Washington. Obviously, you guys know I'm a Washington football team fan. So I like that pick out of you, Akshay. I mean, yeah, the quarterback situation isn't completely figured out. Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to start week 1. There's no doubt in my mind that he's going to. But he's shown that he can be inconsistent. But one thing he does do is he throws the rock and he slings it. They give him a lot of opportunities in his past teams to throw the ball, and he throws the ball deep. And that's one of the things Terry McLaurin is strong at. He runs good routes. He's fast, and he can beat you over top. So I think there's a lot of big play opportunities there between Ryan Fitzpatrick and Terry McLaurin that could prove pretty valuable to any fantasy owner this year. Going into the bust, I mean, every year there seems to be a bust, whether it becomes because of injury. Last year we saw Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley go down with big injuries. You could call them bust because they were probably the consensus top 2 picks last year in almost every fantasy football draft. And they both got injured and suffered a lot of problems throughout the season. But you could also see guys like last year, Michael Thomas, I guess, could be considered a bust. He didn't have really too many big games after signing his contract. Akshay, who do you see as who has the biggest bust potential this year out of all those guys?
Out of all of those guys, I have to go with Michael Thomas just because of his injury and the fact that he decided to go for surgery like last month. So, I mean, he's going to be out for a majority of the season as well. But also that quarterback situation in New Orleans, you're obviously not getting a replacement that's as good as Drew Brees. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Michael Thomas can, find ways to produce, to the point where we see it as well. But I have another bust as well. Another wide receiver. I'm going to go Kenny Galladay. I know he just signed a huge contract with the Giants, but I mean the Giants have Daniel Jones at quarterback. I mean he has yet to show that he is the guy for New York. Very inconsistent. I don't see him being able to replicate the success he had with, if any, with the Lions and Matthew Stafford. So I think he's going to have a down year. I think he's not going to do as well as we expect him to.
I'll shift to running back. I'm going to go Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that may kind of seem like an interesting one to throw out there because he was a first-round draft pick 2 years ago, or an actual first-round draft pick, not talking fantasy. Last year was like a 25th in PPR leagues as a running back or as an overall, which is really high, obviously, and I think he was 15th as running back. It's just hard for me to buy into a guy who was getting less work than Darrell Williams was at the end of the year, and we saw the Chiefs brought in Le'Veon Bell at the end of last season too, so it's hard for me to just kind of project if he's worth being a second-round pick. And we know the Chiefs are going to throw the ball all over the field. Of course they're going to, and that doesn't tend to include to their backs. Like even when they had Le'Veon Bell, Patrick Mahomes wasn't dumping it off to Le'Veon Bell, and I don't see him changing that at all with Edwards-Helaire this season. So I would kind of stay away from drafting Edwards-Helaire in the second round. Maybe wait and see if he's there in the fourth or fifth round, and if he's there, then I would jump on it.
Yeah, I wrote an article earlier in these past few weeks, and I had 5 biggest busts I laid out for the fantasy football season. One of them was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think his small frame is a little worrying, and he hasn't shown the potential to score. I think he's only scored like 2 or 3 touchdowns last year. He did have that big input in his first game, but I don't think he really has too many opportunities in that Kansas City Chiefs offense. Second one might be a little upsetting to some people, but I don't think Alvin Kamara is he won't be a bust per se, but compared to his statistical season that he put up last year, I don't think he's going to match those numbers. Drew Brees threw to the running back 28% of the time last year, which is an astounding number. And if you look at what Jameis has done in his career, it's only been 16.4% of the time he's thrown to the running back. So that's going to take away a lot of opportunities for Alvin Kamara. And the other one I put up there was going to be Julio Jones. In that offense with the Tennessee Titans, there's going to be too many possessions where they're going to be handing the ball to Derrick Henry nearly every play. Derrick Henry gets a lot of carries, a lot of touches, almost 30 per game on average. A.J. Brown is a big-time wide receiver that's going to be taking away a lot of looks from Julio Jones as well. And in that run-centered offense, I just don't see him having enough opportunities to make a real fantasy impact. What do you think about
I agree. I agree. It's a shame that the Titans they got Julio Jones, but I mean they're going to stick to their roots. They're a running team. They have one of the best running backs in the league. It's seemingly hard to stop him. So I think that he's definitely going to take a lot of fantasy points away from Julio, it's tough to see considering that he was in a great situation in Atlanta. Fantasy wise, obviously not, for his career. But I mean, this is if he wants to, get that ring. I think that this is a good opportunity for him. But he's got to, sacrifice obviously those fantasy points that he would be getting in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has a better chance. The Tennessee Titans have been very competitive in the last 2 years, so getting that ring might be in his future. But pleasing fantasy owners, I don't think is. Alec, what do you think on the outlook of guys like Julio Jones and Alvin Kamara this season?
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to Julio, and this kind of goes back to what I said earlier. It's just hard for me to project what his value is going to be because you've got A.J. Brown, and I'm sorry, I'm just not completely bought in on Tannehill as a quarterback at this point. We know they're going to run the ball a lot. With a guy like Derrick Henry in the backfield, you can't just not hand it to him, 30 times a game. I mean, he's going to get a lot of handoffs, and that's a lot of opportunities. So if you're in a PPR, it's not great to draft a Julio Jones, and he's potentially wide receiver 2 there. I would stay away from drafting Julio. I really would. And I think Julio's a guy who, if he's there in an early to mid round, I'm kind of saying here with like a 7, 8, 9, maybe I consider drafting him, but I wouldn't draft him and expect him to be my best wide receiver or think, oh, I'm getting Julio Jones in the 7th round. He's going to be my best wideout. I wouldn't do that. I think that Julio's probably going to have a frustrating year for fantasy owners because they're thinking, well, he's in a new place. He's healthy again. He's going to put up numbers like he did in the past. I just don't see it. And that's no disrespect to Julio Jones. It's more just about the situation that he's in with other weapons that are around him. So I would stay away from taking Julio Jones.
Yeah, I mean, he on a lot of lists that I'm seeing, people are having him around the 15th or 16th best wide receiver. I understand that ranking, but I think there really is potential for him to be even lower than that. The NFL is moving towards a pretty pass-heavy league again. But the Titans have shied away from that type of offense, and they're really just a really run-heavy team. And you mentioned it; he could be a potential wide receiver number 2 on that team, with Ryan Tannehill not being the strongest of quarterbacks. So there's really just not a lot of opportunity there. Any other thoughts you guys have on the fantasy football season?
I don't have any. I'm excited to just get to drafting in a couple of weeks and just see where it goes.
Yeah, I'll add this. If your league is drafting this week, push the draft back because you know
Yeah,
someone's
yeah,
going to
you
pop an
should.
ACL
Yeah.
or suffer some sort of injury in training camp, or someone's going to decide they want to hold out. So yeah, push your drafts back until about that last week if possible.
Yeah, I was about to say, I hope none of you guys have a draft coming up in this next week or so, because we know there's going to be a big injury. Last year, it was Saquon. This year, we've had Cam Akers go out for the Rams. If you guys care about Busse Johnson for the Minnesota Vikings, he went out with a torn ACL. But we're going to start seeing a lot of those injuries with training camp. But luckily, these guys have had more of a training camp this year. Last year with COVID made everything a little confusing. Not a lot of preseason action. So luckily they're getting more of a normal schedule this year. So hopefully they're more warmed up and we're going to avoid more injuries. But it happens every year regardless. So we're definitely going to be seeing some of those. So push back your drafts. Don't have them immediately. You're going to be screwing yourself over if you do. You're going to be drafting someone number 1 or number 2, and they might end up getting hurt. You never know. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for the Sports 2.0 show. I had a great time talking with Alec and Akshay about the upcoming fantasy football season. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sports 2.0 network. We got a lot of good stuff coming to you guys online and on the YouTube channel. I know Alec and Akshay are both busting out some articles for the websites, and we got a lot of great shows coming up for you guys this next week. So yeah, don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.